Hi, I'm Gilles, and for close to 30 years, I've been a math, business, and finance teacher at both the high school and university levels. Over that time, I've seen one thing again and again. Too many people are left confused and sometimes even afraid when it comes to money. That's why I created this course to demystify saving, investing, and growing your hard earned money. So, this is for the young people out there who are nervous about their financial future, and it's also for the not so young who are simply tired of not knowing how investing works. My goal is to make money management clear, approachable, and practical so you can finally feel confident about building your financial future. So let's get started with this presentation. Let's get started with the rising cost of living. In the US, average home prices range between $370,000 up to $500,000. And in Canada, the average home is close to $700,000. Now, at a 20% down payment, that means you need $85,000 in the US and close to $135,000 in Canada, and even more in major cities like Toronto and Vancouver. Even with a minimum 5% down payment, buyers still need US $18,000 and in Canada close to $34,000. Still a massive barrier for young adults without investing. Here's a graph that shows the 20% down payment as well as a 5% down payment in the States, and then the same thing in Canada with $136,000 at 20% for the average home. Grocery costs have risen over 24% in just the last 4 years. Rents are hitting record highs. While national averages are up modestly, approximately 1% year over year, some major cities like Manhattan, Miami, and Vancouver have seen spikes of 9 to 14% in the last year alone. Wages are not keeping pace with inflation, which is creating a widening wealth gap. Here's a graph that shows the CPI, or the inflation index, and the average wage growth index. So we can tell that there is a massive gap between what things cost and what people are making in their salaries. So the key takeaway is, if wages don't keep up with inflation, the only way to preserve and grow purchasing power is through investing. The gap in our education system, which obviously I know about because I was in the education field for 30 years. So despite 12 to 16 years of formal schooling, students graduate without learning how to save efficiently, understanding credit and debt, building wealth through investing, or prepare for retirement. So instead, financial literacy is often left up to chance, often influenced by family, neighbors, or marketing from banks. Which brings me to the silence around money. People are rarely willing to discuss finances openly, not because they were asked for specifics, but because most are embarrassed about not knowing enough about saving and investing. Even in preparing for this course, friends, family, and neighbors were reluctant to share not the numbers in their accounts, but their experiences, struggles, and mistakes. The silence leaves many people navigating money alone without guidance. Now, here's one of the problems with traditional investing. So the many who do invest do so through banks, and the banks charge management expense ratios that are usually around 2% or a little bit below 2%. Over the decades, these fees can erode tens and even hundreds of thousands of dollars from your retirement account. Index ETFs, on the other hand, which are often offered by the banks, often have MERs as low as 0.05 or 0.2%, and they consistently outperform most actively managed funds. So you will learn exactly why lower fees matter and how to take advantage of cost-efficient investment vehicles. Here's a graph that shows the impact of fees on a $100,000 that's invested over 30 years at a 10% gross return. The bank, with their higher fees, and possibly a bank with an ETF, or if you do it yourself through an ETF with lower fees. There's a $700,000 difference between higher fees and lower fees. So here's a graph of the growth of $10,000 over 30 years. I've used the RBC Canadian Dividend Fund, which I really like, and compared it with the SPY. So the yellow line shows the 8.3% return of the mutual fund, and then The blue line shows the SPY, $1,500. The reality of retirement poverty. Current statistics show that 10.9% of Americans 65 or over live below the poverty line. So when you see those people at Walmart greeting and giving you a cart, most often it's not because they love their jobs, it's because they have to work to put food on the table, even in their golden years. So when we're factoring in medical expenses, the number even rises to 14.2%. So almost 1 in 3 older adults have incomes so low that they struggle to cover basic needs, even if they aren't officially considered poor. So why it happens? Well, insufficient savings, rising healthcare costs, decline of pension and employer-sponsored plans, over-reliance on Social Security or the CPP, and lack of financial literacy and planning, and that's a big one. So the key takeaway is, without building personal savings and investments, most people are left relying on inadequate programs. That's why learning how to invest is critical to avoid retirement poverty. So we're breaking through with education, and that's what we're here for, right? By learning investing step by step, you remove fear and guesswork. Knowledge gives you the ability to choose smarter investments, manage risks, and keep more of your own money. Investing doesn't just change your retirement, it changes your freedom, security, and opportunities through life. Here's an example of a $100 monthly investment in SPY at a 10% annual return. If you start at 20 or 30 or 40 and taking the money out at 65 or seeing how much money you have left at 65. Let's look at 40 years old. If you start at 40, that $100 a month will grow to approximately $123,000. Now, if you start at 30, it'll grow, same amount, $339, almost $340,000. But here's the kicker. If you start early, if you start at 20 years old, that $100 a month can grow to almost $1 million. So time in the market matters more than timing the market. Even small amounts invested early on can snowball into life-changing wealth. And why does it matter? Well, the earlier you start investing, the greater the compounding effect. Delaying even 10 years could mean hundreds of thousands of dollars less by retirement. So this course will equip you with knowledge to beat that inflation and avoid high fees, build wealth, and take control of your financial future. So here's what we're going to cover in this course. I'm not going to read word for word, but we are going to talk about savings and the foundations of savings. We're going to talk about the risk versus the reward. And when you're talking about investing, you're talking about time frame. It's a longer time frame, therefore the risk is obviously lower. We're going to talk about investment vehicles, portfolio building, stock market fundamentals, and then we're going to do deep dives in bonds and ETFs versus mutual funds, real estate, and also alternative investments like commodities, and everybody's talking about crypto. We're going to talk about analysis tools, retirement planning, obviously, that's one of the biggest ones, ethical investing, investment psychology, as well as legal and practical tips. So the key takeaway for the introduction is that financial independence isn't something schools will hand you. It's a skill you have to go out and learn for yourself. And this course is designed to give you that missing education. We're going to talk about beating inflation and the rising cost of living. We're going to give you the tools to build wealth step by step, avoid retirement poverty, break free from the silence surrounding money, escape high-fee investing traps, and create a future where money is a tool, not a source of stress.